Okay, hi everyone. I'm Adina Soclof. Welcome to our presentation today, How to Teach Your Child to be an Upstander. Okay, I just want to thank the OU for sponsoring this program, and a shout out to Hannah Farkas and Alex Cook for helping us put this all together. All right, so this is how it's going to work. So I'm going to talk first and talk about the basic principles of being an upstander and what it means. And then we are going to give the presentation over to Devorah Katz of chalacrumbs.com, and she is going to show us some crafts and activities that we could do with our kids to reinforce the principles that we're going to learn in my talk. Because we all know that kids learn best by doing, and they love crafts and activities, and especially around Hanukkah time, there's some great activities that we could do to reinforce the principles of being an upstander. So I'm thrilled to be here with Devorah Katz because last year she lived in Cleveland, and she moved back to Israel. And last year when she was in Cleveland, that's where I'm from, so that's where I am. Well, it's not actually where I'm from. I'm originally from New York, but I've been living in Cleveland for many years now. And so we did a lot of programming together last year, and we didn't know if we were going to be able to continue once she moved back to Israel. But thank God for technology, we are both here today. So she's presenting from Alon Shvut in Israel, and I'm here in Cleveland, and it's great. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then let me tell you a little bit what we're going to talk about today, and that is, first we're going to talk about what is an upstander, right? The talk is how to teach a child to be an upstander. So what is an upstander? And then we're going to talk about how this is a very uniquely Jewish concept, this idea of being an upstander. And then we're going to talk about how we can bring these principles into our home, how to teach our children to be upstanders, and really how to teach them to respect other people and really to stand up for what they believe in. So that's the focus of our talk today. All right, so I really should tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. Again, I'm Adina Soclof. Hi. And I'm the Director of Parent Outreach for A+ Solutions, which is a psychological and educational company here in Cleveland. I also work for Belfair Jewish Children's Bureau here, running workshops based on the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Siblings Without Rivalry by Faber and Maislish. And I also run ParentingSimply.com, which is a parenting website, and I give webinars and audio classes through that medium as well, similar to what we're doing here today. Okay, so that's about me. Oh, I should say I'm married and I have 4 kids. I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So we are busy here at home as well. All right, so let's get started with our topic for today. So again, it's how to teach a child to be an upstander. So you're probably all wondering, what is an upstander? And that's where we're going to start. So this morning I actually met somebody at the supermarket, and she's like, I saw that flyer for your talk that you're giving today. She's like, what's an upstander? I'm like, come and you will find out. Okay, but this term was new to me as well. Okay, but let's first give the definition of an upstander. An upstander is a person who takes action, particularly when the easiest or most acceptable course is to do nothing. An upstander is someone who recognizes when something is wrong and acts to make it right, being socially responsible. Okay, so where did I first hear this from? So Amy Brzezinski, who is a social worker, spoke for ParentingSimply.com last year about bullying and about this upstander project that she is bringing to Jewish day schools. And she started doing it in the Jewish day schools in the area here in Cleveland. And you could see I have her, on the handout, I have her website. I think it's towards the end. I gave it to you. Okay, it's bullying prevention in jds.com, but it's on your handout. Okay, so she spoke about this Upstander project that she developed. And it's a very simple project that she brings into Jewish day schools, and it's based on this positive principles of positive psychology. So what does she do? She'll go into the classroom, or she'll train teachers to go into the classroom and talk to kids about looking for the positive in their classmates' behavior. Okay, and if they see something that another child has done that was positive, or if they've been the recipient of kindness, they should write a note about it. Okay, and they should write it down and then give it to their teacher. And then the teacher collects all these notes, and she, like once a week, she reads them out loud, and there's like a reward system for the notes that you give in, usually a behavioral reward, more time with your teacher, more time with a mentor, something like that. But they make a big deal about these notes. Like, and some of the examples of the notes are, Sarah lent me a pencil because I forgot mine. Or Eli gave me some of his chocolate bar today. Or Mikey let me have a turn on the slide at recess. Okay, so some very simple things that other kids are doing for them. Later on, after Amy gave this talk, I saw that other people are calling this idea tootling. So instead of tattling, they're tootling. Okay, opposite of tootling. Tattling is tootling. Get it? Very cute. So tootling is a very cute way to talk about this Upstander project. Okay. Now, what happened was that once the students started writing about the acts of kindnesses that were happening to them, the teachers and Amy started to see that the children started writing about acts of kindness that they witnessed that had really nothing to do with them, something that they saw their friend do for another friend. Okay, so some examples were including helping someone go to the nurse when they got hurt on the playground, breaking up a fight between two other peers, or someone told someone else to stop calling another student nasty names. Okay, they were starting to behave in an upstander type of way. They were standing up for other people, or they were noticing that other people were standing up for others, or just doing kindnesses to others. Okay, then they started to see that kids started to befriend others that they had previously shunned. Like the kids in the class were just having these very positive feelings towards each other. And studies that were done on this kind of program showed that it improved the atmosphere of the classroom. It enhanced peer relationships overall. It helped in reducing the instances of bullying because children are taught to recognize and praise pro-social behavior in a struggling or socially awkward peer. Okay, so it's just a brilliant, simple idea, and it helps to prevent bullying. This whole Upstander project. Actually, I just want to add that in the article that she wrote for us, Amy also wrote an article for Parenting Simply. She taught a class and she also wrote an article. She said that this man, Samuel Oliner, was an author of the book, The Altruistic Personality. And what he did was he interviewed righteous Gentiles who helped Jews during the Holocaust. And he asked them, like, what made you do it? What made you risk your life to help Jewish people? And many of them said, well, I just did one act of kindness that sort of led to another act of kindness, and I just, I couldn't stop. And when I heard that, and also thinking about the Upstander project, it reminds me of the principle from Pirkei Avot, which is mitzvah goreret mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another. One kindness leads to another kindness. So that's really what the Upstander project is. Okay. So, but we don't want to just leave this up to the school. Okay, it's not fair if our kids need to learn these principles in school. We need to fortify them at home with these principles of being an upstander, of respecting others, of looking for the positive in other people. Okay, Daniel Goleman in his break in his book Emotional Intelligence says that family is the primary school for emotional learning. Okay, so that's really where we want to teach them these principles of being an upstander. Okay, and that's what we're going to discuss today. But I do want to take a step back and just talk about how being an upstander is really a uniquely Jewish principle. Okay. So Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, I'm sorry, in his Pesach Haggadah. Should I show this side here? Okay, it's excellent. I highly recommend it. You see I have all these little pieces of paper here showing where I marked off interesting bits of information. So in his book, and you have it on your handout, he says that the religion of ancient Israel was one of the most stunning transformations ever wrought in humanity's moral imagination. Never more so than in the fact of Exodus itself. Okay, so I know we're talking really about CHANUKAH here, but whatever, it all started with Yetziat Mitzrayim, with the Exodus. Okay, so in antiquity, the gods were on the side of the established power. They underwrote the reign of kings, emperors, and princes, an idea revived in Europe in the Middle Ages, in the form of the doctrine of the divine right of kings. Rulers ruled because they were gods or children of gods or prime intermediaries between gods and mankind. They held say on earth for the same reason as did the sun in the sky. There was an order on earth as in heaven by which the strong ruled the weak, and power was the guarantor of order. That God, creator of heaven and earth, might intervene in history to liberate slaves was the ultimately unthinkable. Okay, so we see that in pre-Exodus, it was just, if you were weak, you were weak, and then you just stayed like that. Okay, so society was stratified, like there was no way for you to move into another social class. And certainly being a slave, like no one's going to look at you, certainly not God. Okay, thus a paradox was born, which ever since has inspired men and women to break the chains of their oppression. That true power is distinguished by its concern for the powerless, that greatness is measured by the ability to hear the cry of the otherwise unheard, the weak, the vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, right? How many times do we hear this in Tanakh, in the Torah, about the weak, the orphan, the stranger? Let me just fix this a bit. Okay. And that freedom is not worthy unless it means freedom for all, okay? So basically, Rabbi Sacks is saying that this was a novel idea, the story of the Exodus. The Jews taught the world that dictators could be overthrown. We brought the concept of championing the underdog to the world, okay? And I think also in Tanakh and all the stories of Jewish history, I mean, these themes of standing up for what is right, okay? Standing up for the Torah, for God, and standing up for the downtrodden, for the weak, for those who have less than you. I mean, those are just over and over again. Those are the themes in Tanakh and in Jewish history. We hear those stories over and over again. It's so Jewish. So Jewish. Okay, I mean, so even before Yetziat Mitzrayim, you have Abraham who stood up to Nimrod. You have Abraham who saved Lot from in the war between the 4 and 5 kings. You have Yaakov standing up to Lavan, Yaakov standing up to Esav. You have Yosef. We just read this parsha of Yosef taking care of the other people in jail with him, okay? And being caring. And Then we have obviously Moshe against Paro, which is what we were just talking about. We have Eliyahu Hanavi against Izebel and Achab. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Those two themes of standing up for what's right, standing up for the Torah, and standing up for the weak and the downtrodden. Okay, and so much so in the story of Chanukah. I mean, the weak against the weak against the strong, the little against the many, like the few against the many. I mean, that is really what the story of Chanukah is all about. Okay, I have some more examples, but let's move on. Okay, but we should just know that we defend the underdog, okay? And like so often our people were downtrodden, and we had leaders who stood up for us, like Mordechai and Esther. But again, the list goes on and on. All right, so the question is now that we know that this is like an innate characteristic that we have, that we are, as a Jewish people, we stand up for others, how can we inspire our kids to act in this way? To bring out those latent characteristics, maybe they have those they definitely have those latent characteristics, but maybe they need to be inspired to use them. So really, how can we do this? All right, so again, it really starts at home. And there's some very simple things that we could do. So I knew somebody who said, it was a father, and we were talking, it was soon after the start of the school year, and he said that when his kids come home from school on the first day of class, he always says to them, so, were there any new kids in your class? And he said, what did you do to make them comfortable? That's what he would ask them when they would come home. Not, who's your teacher? Did you get an A? No, this is what he asked him. And I love, just because I'm into these communication skills, I love that he said, what did you do to make them comfortable? Like assuming already, the question assumes that he already asked, that they had done something, right? They had already done something instead of, did you do something nice for them today, right? Like that could be misconstrued as a accusation. So I love the way he had asked that. And right, this teaches respect for others. This teaches, caring about the vulnerable. Like, who is more vulnerable than that child who is new to a class, right? So I thought that's very beautiful. So now we're way past the start of school, but we could still ask our kids, like, is there anybody who's having trouble in your class? Like, what can you do to help those kids who maybe, the other kids are making fun of, or, maybe not doing so well in the classroom? Like, what could you do to help them out? Or what are you doing to help them? Really say, what are you doing already to help them out? Okay, so we can still use that even though it's not the first day of school anymore. Okay. Another thing is really, again, teaching kids about the mitzvah of kavod habriyot, of really respecting others. So I remember I was in a class with Mrs. Faith Blau. She used to give a class, Parsha class, every week, many years ago. And so one time she was talking about parenting, and she said, there is always a value that a Jewish value that parents give over to their children. Something that's so important to parents, and that they feel strongly about, that kids really learn from this. Okay, so she asked, like, what was one positive Jewish value that your parents gave over to you? Like something that they felt strongly about, that you really understood that this was important to them and it was an important Jewish concept. She gave examples of tzedakah, maybe Bikur Cholim, Jewish education, Shabbos. And so I was sitting next to my friend, and she said, the thing that my parents really valued and they gave over to us was really respecting other people. And they always would say to us, you don't have to like them, you don't have to agree with them, or whoever it is. You don't have to like other people, you don't have to agree with other people, but you always have to respect other people. And I know her family, and they really live this. It's not only that they just said it, but they really live this. So I'm sure that you're giving over these positive values, the things that really speak to you about being a Jew. I'm sure you're giving over those values to your kids, but you might want to add this one more, okay? You don't have to like other people, you don't have to agree with other people, but you do need to respect other people. So that's really a great way to start teaching kids to respect others. Okay. Another thing we could do is, and I feel bad saying this, but really check our Lashon Hara and check how much Lashon Hara we speak. So we all know that Lashon Hara destroys the one who speaks Lashon Hara, destroys the one being spoken about, and it also destroys the people hearing the Lashon Hara. And who hears our Lashon Hara the most? Probably our kids. They're always listening to hear what we say. And I think this really can impact kids in very negative ways. So I had a friend who we were in a Shmir HaLashon class together, and she said, you know, my parents would always speak very negatively about others. Like, they would always make these very negative comments, like, you know, oh, I can't believe the Schwartzes bought that house. It's, how dumb is that? It's like falling apart. Or, could you believe what so-and-so was wearing? Like, oh my gosh, that's like the ugliest outfit. It just does not compliment her. And she said that she was always so nervous that her parents were going to turn around and judge her. Like, she felt she always had to be like attuned to what she was doing and be very careful not to have any missteps, because maybe it'll be wrong, maybe it'll make a mistake, maybe my parents will start talking negatively about me. And she became very fearful, and it really impacted her self-esteem. So this is like a very sensitive child. That's really what could happen. So we want to be very careful with how we speak Lashon Hara. Trust me, I am not perfect with this at all, but it's important to be cognizant of it. Okay? I mean, another thing also is that really Lashon Hara could cause kids to disrespect others. Let's say you're talking about, I don't know, the Cohen family, right? And you say, oh my God, they're so nasty. I think each one is nastier than the next. Or just like, oh, you know, the Schwartzes, they're so dumb. They're like, you know, each one is dumber than the next. Or whatever it is, like any comments that you make or asides that you make about families. Your kids hear this, and then they go to meet the Cohen's kid in their classroom, and they go to meet the Schwartz's kid in their classroom, and they have preconceived notions about these kids. Like, they're going to think, oh, well, I heard that this kid was nasty, so I don't have to be nice to him, or I heard this kid is stupid, so why would I want to be friends with them? And it just breeds disrespect for others. So we need to be careful. So a few years ago, I joined a Machzon Lefi. So my sister recommended doing this. And there's one here in Cleveland where you take 2 hours a day where you don't speak Lashon Hara. At first I was like, 2 hours? I can't do 2 hours? That's crazy. So, but I took 2 hours a day, and it really does help. It really, and it carries over to the rest of the day as well. But that's where you want to start small. Maybe you don't want to do 2 hours, you want to do 1 hour, just to help us recognize what Lashon Hara is, and that we can stop talking in this way about other people. Okay. So I do want to add that, you know, if there is really like a serious problem with another kid in the class, or, you know, we always, like, if there is a child that we know is going through a difficult time, but if maybe they're, one of their parents is ill, or maybe their parents are going through a divorce, you know, we'll tell our kids, you know, I think so-and-so's might be having a little bit of a hard time. You might want to, you know, give him a little extra attention. Might want to be a little bit extra nice to him, and like invite him over. Okay, just to help them recognize that they might be having trouble, and to look out for another child, but also we'll say, you know, if things are getting out of hand, or if you feel like his behavior is, you know, not appropriate, or you feel like it's getting to the point where it's dangerous and you feel like it's too much for you, you know, please just come and tell us, okay? And I think that's very important to teach kids that they can have compassion with boundaries, and but again, to really look out for others, okay, until it really does get too much for them. Okay. So that's it for really, well, not it, but that's it for teaching kids to really respect others through, you know, being careful with our lashon hara, and talking to our kids about maybe the new kids in the class or anybody who's having trouble. Okay. Now another thing that we can do is to teach children to respect others is to teach kids that they need to respect themselves, that they're made in God's image, okay? And that everyone is made in God's image, okay? Again, a very Jewish concept. Okay, so I remember when my kids were little and they would come to me and they'd say, my friend called me stupid. So I would say, oh, that really could be hurtful. And then I would say, well, I guess that friend is forgetting that Hashem made you, and Hashem really doesn't make anything stupid, okay? And we need to recognize that intelligence, like we value intelligence, we value smarts as Jewish people, but it's really a gift from God. It's nothing really that we do, okay? And really our attitude needs to be that we all have a purpose in life, each one of us. Your purpose is not better than anybody else's purpose, okay? God needs all of us together to fulfill our purpose. And we're all part of God's plan. And we're really all cogs in the wheel of life. And we need to remember this. And I think by teaching kids to respect others and really stopping to talk lashon hara, those are those silent messages of respecting others, and that we're all needed. We're all needed. Nobody is more special than the next one. Okay. All right, so now how can we bring the principles of the Upstander project, Amy Brzezinski's Upstander project, into our home, right? This, talking about the kindnesses of others. Like, can we do this between siblings? So I know in positive discipline, the positive discipline approach, they really recommend having family meetings where they have weekly family meetings where the family discusses their issues. It could be anything from where they're going on vacation or somebody is forgetting to put the toilet seat down, right? But what they start off the family meetings with complimenting each other. Everybody has to give a compliment about another person in the family, which is, I think, is just a very beautiful way to start off the meeting. Gives a very positive feeling. Also, in Siblings Without Rivalry by Faber and Maislish, they really recommend that if siblings are having a really rough time with each other, to sort of sit down and have like a little meeting and try to help kids come up with some nice things about each other. So I remember I did this with my two older kids when they were younger, probably when they were like about 7 and 5, and they were just fighting a lot. And so we sat down, it was like around bedtime, and I said, you guys seem to be fighting a lot, and I thought maybe we could come up with the things that you appreciate about each other. Okay, so they were having a really hard time, so I made some suggestions like, remember when you let Moshe play with your new toy, and remember when he let you play with his friends when his friends came over, right? And then, so I gave them a couple of suggestions, and then they started coming up with their own, like, oh, really, Eitan taught me how to play that computer game, and you know, the other day, I don't remember exactly what it is, but like, you know, Moshe let me go first when we were, I don't know, playing kickball. So, and after this we did, like, they really just came up with like one or two things. And after that, like, really, like, you could see that they were having an easier time getting along with each other. So it's a very sweet thing to do. We also, this was around, I forgot where I had heard this idea from, but this was around Tisha B'Av during the 9 days. We had a marble jar, which we filled up with marbles anytime somebody would say something nice about each other. So it was very funny. They would be like, you know, my son would say to my daughter, you look so beautiful. Like, he would say that 5 times and put marbles in, but still, it doesn't matter. It was just like the whole idea of it, like, you know, to really inspire ahavat chinam in my kids during the 9 days where, you know, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed by sinat chinam. So it was just, so basically it's using those principles of the Upstander project. I didn't know it was called an Upstander project then. Okay, so, or the tootling. We wanted to, I like that word, tootling. Okay, talking about the good things that other people are doing for you. Okay, instead of tattling. So I recently, like after Amy Brzezinski had spoke, I was talking to my kids, and they're older now, and I told them a little bit about this tootling project. I'm like, so, like, what do you think we can do in our house now? And they're like, well, would we have to, like, how many times would we have to tootle before we were able to tattle? Like, or could we start off by tootling and then end off with a tattle? Like, oh, you're so good at baseball, but you stink at basketball, right? Or whatever. But it was a fun conversation, and I had said to them, you know, tootling, it's really helping in the classroom with bullying and preventing bullying. So it was a cute conversation. Never really came to anything, but it is important to talk about these things with your kids. Okay, so I think we need to start wrapping this up. Okay, so another thing that we really can do to teach kids to respect others is through storytelling, okay? Telling kids stories about people who stood up for others, people who did the right thing, who stood up for Torah. We're really not talking so much about that today, but it's very connected in our Jewish psyche. And obviously the stories that we could tell are from Tanakh, like what we had just spoken about Abraham and Nimrod and well, actually even just Yehuda standing up to Yosef to protect Binyamin. So that's what we're reading in this parsha next week. And just, there are, you know, obviously Moshe standing up for Paro, and anything, you know, talking about in the Holocaust how people stood up for the Jewish people. Not too many, but there were some. There is at Yad Vashem the Walk for Righteous Gentiles. And I mean, even just the stories of modern day Israel, the establishment of the state, about how, you know, we were few in number and we defeated the many. So these are just, again, all stories that can really reinforce those principles of being an upstander. Okay, and storytelling is it's a great way to teach our kids. Okay, and it's a fun way, it's an easy way. Okay. So now let's talk about specifically about what to tell kids if they witness a bullying situation. So this is really something that you want to talk about, you know, all the time at your Shabbos table. Just giving them, not when they're actually came home and said, oh, I saw this bullying situation, what should I do? Because oftentimes kids aren't going to say that. But really, this should be part of the conversation that you're having at home. Again, at the Shabbos table, at the dinner table. Okay? Because kids don't know instinctively what to do in these situations. We don't know. As adults, it's so hard if we see something inappropriate happening. It's very hard for us to stand up for what is right, and certainly for kids, it is tough. Okay, so what do the experts say? We should tell our kids that there are a few ways to handle witnessing a bullying situation. So number one, you could actually go over to the bully and tell him to stop bullying. Okay, but this might be very hard for kids to do. They might be frightened of doing that. So the next thing that they could do is if they see a child being bullied, go over to the child and say, come and play with me. Like, get him away from the situation. If that might be too much for them, then after the episode is over, they could go over to the child and say, you know, why don't you come and play with me? Like, help them feel better. And then finally, if they can't do any of those things, then they really should tell an adult, which is very hard for kids to do, but it needs to be out there. We need to let them know what they can do. All right, and then finally, always tell them that you always could come to me with anything. You could always let me know, and reassure them that the adults or the other kids don't have to know who told about the bullying situation. Okay, like, you know, they won't lose face if people don't have to find out that they were the one who told, because sometimes kids are very nervous about that. So those are some ways that we could teach our kids to handle bullying situations that they witness, and teach them to be the upstander principles. Okay, so that's basically it for today. Okay, so just to quickly review, we spoke about what is an upstander, and we spoke about Amy Brzezinski's Upstander project. We spoke about how it is a uniquely Jewish concept to be an upstander. We brought this concept to the world, and we spoke about some ways that we could teach our kids to respect others. Okay, it's just very simple ways of asking our kids about the new kids in their school. Not so simple of stopping Lashon Hara. Right, about having a value in your home of respecting others. You don't have to like them, agree with them, but you do need to respect them. And really giving kids ideas of what they can do when they witness a bully situation. All right, so now I am going to hand this over to Devorah Katz. So hello, Devorah.